Welcome back to the Nontaku Anime Chat, where we are eternally pondering the question, who is best girl? Joining me this time to go on many adventures and ponder many things is none other than Guardian Enzo.
Good morning.
Okay, so today I want to start off our podcast by copying you as I always do, because you do very interesting things, Guardian Enzo. And I'm going to ask you a question, which is which anime world would you like to visit if you had a choice, where you could just be an inhabitant? So you wouldn't be part of the main story, but you'd be like an NPC and you can kind of hang out in that world and see how it's going. And while you think about that, I'll kind of give you my first one. And I think I would probably want to go to the world of Fairy Tail just because there's magic in that world. There's a lot of stuff that happens beyond just the main cast. There's a bunch of guilds and stuff like that. So for me, I'd be very excited about going to that world among many others. And I'm sure we'll discuss this question a couple of times. But any place you would want to go, any anime at all?
That's an interesting question. Well, I don't know if this would be my answer after I had a lot of time to think about it, but funnily enough, the first thing that came to mind for me was Uchiten Kazoku, the eccentric family, because really that's Kyoto and it's just a few miles down the road for me. But the world of Kyoto in that series with Tengu and and all kinds of interesting magical things going on, and flying tea houses, and I mean Kyoto is pretty magical anyway, but if you add Tanuki and Tengu being real and all the stuff, and ghost trains, and I think that would be a really fun world to be a part of. But I reserve the right, if something occurs to me inspirationally during the course of our recording, I'll interject it later.
Sure, sure. I love how you can go anywhere and you decide to go 2 blocks down the street or whatever.
Yeah,
So
I
that's
know
pretty
it's
funny.
true. Well, it is true though that I really love Kyoto, so that's maybe that has something to do with it.
Yes, I definitely also want to visit Kyoto when I go to Japan for the first time because some of the beauty and some of the stuff I've seen, just in terms of pictures and obviously in anime, it looks really nice. Speaking of which, I think we can get started with the first thing that we like to talk about, which is user feedback, because that is the lifeblood of this adventure that we are on. So we got a couple of nice pieces of feedback this week. All of it was very kind. The one I'll start with is Andrew, and I'll read his pieces of his comment a little bit because what was impressive about this one, Guardian Enzo, was that it actually came in through an email.
Hmm.
And so it was a little bit of an extra effort. He said that, he wanted to compliment us on the podcast. He listens to it when he commutes to work. And one of the interesting things he said was, I don't have any kind of social media. So for him, he feels like he's a bit away from the anime scene because a lot of it is definitely on Twitter. And so I definitely wanted to say to him and everybody else that perhaps listens to us but isn't on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you kind of interact with anime people, you're definitely welcome. We'll make a note of it at the end of the podcast, but I definitely want to include you guys in the conversation as well because I don't think social media is the be all end all. Any thoughts on that, Guardian Enzo?
No, I most of my younger compatriots over at Random Curiosity seem to feel that the main social media hub for anime now is Discord, actually, or maybe even Reddit, but even more Discord. But I'm on Twitter, and I can tell you, I'm on Discord and Reddit too. But I spend more time on Twitter, and I can tell you that Twitter does have a pretty active anime community. And yeah, absolutely. If someone is outside of the so-called social media world, uh, you and I were both anime fans before social media was really even a thing. So we absolutely want to include those people. And when things are going on in the world the way they're going on right now, especially, there's a tendency to want to tune out social media altogether anyway, because it can become almost like an addiction. You have to absorb every piece of scary news that you can, and so anime outside social media, I'm all in favor of it. Andrew, thanks very much for the comment, and we sure appreciate you being here.
Cool. And then I'll follow this up with two of our regulars. We have Princess Usagi and Red from Lost in America. And they were both very nice. Red specifically said that He appreciated the answers we gave on the podcast. Last week's podcast was basically a mailbag episode, which Guardian Enzo said that the title sounded a bit sad. So if you felt that, definitely let me know, and I can tone down the emo-ness a little bit. And then Princess Usagi, I want to make note of this because she really liked your Hunter x Hunter character discussion that you started us off with as a nice icebreaker. So definitely, and she mentioned that she would want Nov to be the character that she would hang out with on a road trip.
Which I thought was that was an interesting choice, actually. No, that's not the direction I would have gone. She backed it up pretty well, but it's definitely not a direction I would have gone.
Yeah, same here. I didn't even think of Nov, honestly. So, Princess Hime-sama definitely gave us something to think about. And then finally, since I said I would do this, I want to give a shout out to Sax God over at Apple iTunes because he reviewed us and he gave us a pretty long and extensive review. It was 5 stars, so really thank you for that. And he basically a bunch of really good compliments. He said it's not only his favorite anime podcast, but his favorite podcast period, which I thought was the highest compliment we could get. And then he did say that, he was basically pushing people to listen to it, even though it's kind of new and stuff like that. So, yeah, definitely nice to see that as well.
Yeah, that one was really great. We love organic feedback on our podcast channels. That's awesome. So thank you very much for that, Sex God. I love the username too. That's just on the edge of double entendre there, so I really like that. Also, by the way, on your question, or the first question, another series that popped into my mind is Mushishi. I just want to say, even though it could be a little scary, what a fascinating world to be part of that would be.
Oh wow, you are a brave man.
Yeah.
Mushishi would just be like, I don't know, I would feel very unsafe. So definitely, you can tell which one of us has the adventure streak in him more.
Well, let me just justify that a little bit because other thing I think that makes Mushishi so appealing, other than the fact that the mystical exists in reality, there is it's a Japan that's so lost now, it's so gone in the modern world, and it would be the opportunity to experience a Japan that really no longer exists, and just the sheer beauty of the landscapes and the things that you see in that show is pretty awe inspiring for me.
I hear you, but I also think you'd be probably one of the people that would be afflicted by something that the main character would then have to come in and save you from.
That's
Because
possible.
being an NPC in that world is not a great thing.
Yeah,
but it's a good choice. I like that world for sure. Okay, and since you mentioned it with social media news, I did want to comment a little bit really quickly about, the fact that we definitely here, especially in the United States, it's a bit of a difficult time and it's a very politically charged time. So with COVID happening and all that stuff, we just wanted to wish our US viewers, as we do for every country or people that we hear about that, are going through a difficult time, we want to wish them some love and some support. And definitely, one of the reasons we do this podcast, both for ourselves and hopefully for you, the audience, is so we can all kind of take a break and escape away from, the reality that we all deal with and have a good time. So I hope we do. I hope you guys get that from us, and we wish everybody the best. Anything to add, Guardian Enzo?
Yeah, just ditto. I mean, dark times out there. Politics is not our thing. That's not what we talk about. That doesn't mean we're not aware of them and don't have opinions on them. But that's not. We're here to provide an escape from that, as you said, and particularly now, as we're recording, it's a very unpredictable and scary time in the U.S. to say the least. As some amazing news stories breaking just in the last couple of days. 2020 just won't quit. Hang in there, hang in there. Things will get better. And we're not going to stop doing what we do just because things are tough, because I think it's times like this, people more than ever need an escape from all that.
Yes. And speaking of escape, let's escape away from this section
Sweet.
and head into our first big section of the week.
What we're watching.
And so we've escaped to our first destination on this journey, the What We're Watching Citadel. So, Guardian Enzo, I'm going to kind of put some limitations on us a little bit just because I think I ran us a bit long last week. So, what we're going to do is we're going to keep it to 3 series each a week, because a ton of premieres are coming out, and I'm sure some of them will watch and stuff like that. So we'll just bulk pile some of them, maybe give them a couple of episodes. And I'll actually turn it over to you first. What have you been watching this week? Any updates? Anything from the new season or the old?
Well, I have. It's Saturday morning here, so I haven't really. We just got to the point where we've gotten a big dump of new shows, but I haven't had a chance to watch too much yet. As you know, I watched Jujutsu Kaisen, which we talked about last week. The one other premiere that I've managed to watch so far is the new Higurashi, which I thought was quite good. Higurashi no Naku Koroni. I have watched every anime they've made out of it, although I've not read any of the manga or played any of the games. 7 years since the last one. The last OVA was quite good, actually, although the couple before that were really, I thought, pretty bad. So there's been quite a range with Higurashi, and I thought this seemed to fall more on the upper end of the range quality wise. It moved a little faster than how I remember the pacing from the original series. And the designs were a little more pastel colored and cute. But generally speaking, I thought it kind of looked and felt kind of old school. It didn't look like they tried to refresh or update things too much, which I think is kind of why it worked. New studio Passion, new director who's quite a competent director, has done Hunter x Hunter movie and some other fairly big things. Kawaguchi Kiichiro. So I thought it was good. It gave me the feeling of the original Higurashi, which is kind of what I was looking for, and it felt like I was watching anime 10 years ago rather than now.
Indeed, I think it was a very good nostalgia trip. And I think one of the reasons it worked for me as well as it did was because it did feel like it was respecting the original series. We should mention this is a remake, so I definitely was a little bit surprised by that. I didn't think they would just start from the beginning. And I agree with you, some things were happening a bit quicker. For one thing, and no spoilers here, but something happens at the very start of the episode that in the original series did not happen that early. And then also they've been seeding some things a little bit early that we didn't see until the second season of the original
Right.
series. So I think that's all good because I always felt like in the original Higurashi, they kind of the first series was this weird experimental thing, and then the second series were where they started to try and explain some of that in the different arcs and all the different timelines and that stuff. And it seems like they will do that a lot earlier this time. So I think it's good. I don't know if you loved it, but I loved how they ended with the original opening theme.
Yeah, that was great. That was great.
I honestly think that opening theme is so iconic you cannot change it. So I hope they actually stick with that either as an opening or an ending theme, or maybe they just use that music as a interstitial thing. But that was really good.
Yeah, a comparison to me, I would say, is when the UQ Holder, when the anime came out. Not a great anime by any means, but the original Negima anime opening theme is so iconic that they kept the theme. They re-recorded it with the new actors, which I thought was really. It was kind of like the most memorable thing about the Negima anime was the OP. So it's like you can't change that, and I was glad that Higurashi kind of took the same approach, and I assume we'll be seeing it as the OP from here on forward. We'll see. So as far as like what else? Like I said, I haven't really dived headfirst into the new season yet, just because I haven't had time. Talk to me tomorrow, and it would be a different story. I did finish my rewatch of Seirei no Moribito. Finally, I worked myself up for about 3 weeks to watch that last episode because I knew it would kick my ass, and it did. And it felt very strange to be writing a series review post about a series I finished originally, 12 years ago, and is my favorite anime of all time. But you know, beautiful ending, sad, incredibly bittersweet ending, and meaningful and powerful and incredibly true to the characters. Just like everything else in Seirei Moribito, they totally nailed the ending. The one thing I want to say about the ending of Moribito, which I think is so important, is don't have the big dramatic plot climax in the final fucking episode. Do it in the episode, in the penultimate episode, and give the final episode to the characters. You have to have a chance to say goodbye to the characters. You have to have you have to have a little benediction there at the end. You can't end with the crescendo. Why do so many series screw that up? I don't understand it. And Lord knows Morabito isn't the only series that got that right, but it does seem to be fairly rare, and it's a perfect example of how to do that. So that would be another show I was watching this week. Is my all-time favorite, Serie No Morbito.
Yeah, for sure. The ending epilogue episode is really important to kind of, like you said, say goodbye to the series, set up, the expectations. Because if you are really attached to the cast of characters that you've been following, it's a good thing. And I agree with you. Serie no Moribito does do a good job of that. So, I will probably see it soon. I'm still working up the time to fit in a new series or a rewatch. I still have to finish Gundam Seed, but yeah, Serie no Moribito, especially with it being on High Dive, is very tempting.
Totally.
Anything else you got for me?
Great Pretender, which I'm now up through episode 20, so 3 episodes to go. Won't talk about the spoilers because I don't know all the spoilers, but some of you may be waiting and haven't watched it, and of course, it hasn't been released on Netflix in the West yet. Let me just say I'm sort of understanding why this last arc has been a little bit divisive among viewers. I like it a lot. I so far don't like it as much as I like the first 3 arcs for reasons I feel like I shouldn't talk about in case people haven't watched any of it yet, especially since it hasn't been released outside of Japan officially, so I won't. But let's just say it's still a great show, but I get why some people are not as up on this arc as they were in the first 3. That makes some storytelling decisions which I think are justifiable, but will probably prove a little bit divisive among people who see it.
Sure, sure. That's interesting to note. I'm excited to get my hands on it when I do, and that's what I've heard as well. People aren't as excited about the latest arc, but I don't think it's over yet, right? Because how many more episodes do you have to
I
go?
have 3 episodes to go. They're all out there. They're all streamed on Netflix Japan and have been for like 10 days, but I haven't watched the last 3 episodes yet.
Sure, sure. I'll be curious to hear what you think once it's over, because I remember the first episode was kind of okay for Great Pretender's first arc, but then it just like amped it up to 11. So for me, the series as a whole hasn't been able to top that first arc, but we'll see. We'll see for sure. Okay, so for me, we already covered Higurashi, which was the news thing. ReZero finished up the first part of season 2, and it was phenomenal. I would say, as of right now, it's my anime of the year because not one week has it disappointed me, and it's been a long time since I've thoroughly enjoyed a series week by week and just been hungering for the next episode. I think my episode blog posts on average for the show were like over 1,500 words, so
Wow.
lots to talk about too. And I've gone back, or I used to be able to do 2,000 words a pop, and I've tried to like go brief, but with ReZero I just can't do that anymore. So really good. I'm excited about the day where you finally get time to go back and give it another shot, because I think, especially since you liked Made in Abyss and some of these other and Hunter x Hunter, I think some of the parts that a lot of people don't like, the fact that it gets really dark, won't bother you, and so you might find something really special in there.
Okay. I watched 6 or 7 episodes and it just didn't grab me, but it's one of those shows that people really like it. So I always think to myself, well, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just missing something here. So it's on my list. I can't give any estimate on when, but it's on my list to go back and give it another shot.
Yeah, I think it becomes exceptional in its second half. Until then, it's just a standard light novel series. But then the second half of the first season, which is one giant arc, is impressive, I think.
Okay.
Beyond that, the other show I wanted to talk about really quickly, because I don't think we need to spend too much time on it, is Dragon's Dogma, which is the Netflix anime adaptation of the video game series by Capcom. And I liked it. I would say it's CGI, and it's not terrible CGI, although the monsters do look kind of cheap.
Hmm.
But the story is interesting. it looks like it's definitely trying to ape the Game of Thrones storytelling style, and obviously it's going for that particular crowd. But it's not inoffensive. I know some of the fans of the game don't like some of the changes that they made. As somebody who's not a diehard fan of the games, I found it pretty decent. It's a good, quick series that you could probably blast through over a weekend. But honestly, it's nothing top tier. If you're hankering for some fantasy, I think you'll enjoy it. Have you seen that one?
It's on my list as something. Check that out when you have time. Kind of list somewhere below Ray Zero, but not in the dumpster. Basically, I'll probably check it out at some point, an episode or two, and see what I think about it.
Yeah, and an episode or two is all you need because it is very consistent throughout. If you don't like the first episode, you won't like anything going forward. And if you find the first episode to be decent and good, then you'll probably enjoy the rest of it.
Okay, that sounds reasonable.
So that's all I had, and definitely as the season goes forward, we will have more to say on that. But now I think our journey continues, and we go to perhaps one of the most important stops on our journey.
The anime news.
So, dear listeners, we've made it. We've made it to our first big challenge. We're going to slay the Goblin Lord known as the Anime News. So, Guardian Enzo, I think as we tend to do whenever you host, I think we'll just make this a regular segment and have you go over the Oricon lists and the DVD sales and all the sales data that I am always super curious to hear about. So, take it away.
All right. Well, as usual, we'll start with the weekly comic rankings. Again, this is individual volumes. Number one, again, One Piece 97. This time it only sold about 300,000 copies, but that's about like 1.7 million total. Also, want to note on that Oda Sensei announced a hiatus of like 3 weeks from One Piece, which in the current situation obviously makes everyone a little concerned. But he's reportedly is fine now and is just catching up. That's what they're saying anyway. So he's off until like towards the end of October as far as publication. And it's rare. He doesn't take a lot of hiatuses, Oda Sensei. So that's a rare thing. Kingdom is number two. Doomsday Walker, Walker Romanze, which is a light novel that turned into a manga, which I think was originally a game, if I'm not mistaken, right? Walker Romanze.
No idea.
Okay, that's number three. Golden Kamui hangs on at number four. Hozuki no Ritetsu, a show I dearly love, came in at number 5. Attack on Titan 32 returns to the list at number 6. Spy X Family, number 7. Giant Killing, number 8. A very good soccer manga for those of you that love soccer. Campfire Cooking in Another World, which is Dungeon Meshi? No, it's not Dungeon Meshi. I don't know this one. Campfire Cooking in Another World?
Sounds like an isekai.
Yeah, okay. That's number 9. And Act of Diamond, The Torture of Agent, number 23. Okay, so any thoughts on that top 10?
First of all, thank you for saying that. And we will continue to say that every time
Absolutely.
Dianoace comes up. The big thing for me was definitely with One Piece, for example, Eiichiro Oda, the guy sleeps like 4 hours a day, is what he's said in interviews. And I think he's getting to the point where, as his age gets older and older, that he won't be able to keep doing that. So I think it's nice for him to take breaks. And honestly, given how much he gives to his manga, I think that's totally fine. I liked every item on this list, I think, for where it was, except for the game one that you talked about. So this is always pleasant to hear. The manga that we love are doing well, so that's great.
Okay, on to the Buy Comic Work ranking, which is the total volume sales for everything in a series, a franchise. Can you guess the number one?
One Piece again, or is it still Kimetsu no Yaiba?
No. It's still Kimetsu, despite
Oh wow,
not
okay.
having anything new for a while. One Piece is number 2. Kingdom, number 3. Attack on Titan, number 4. Valkyrie of the End, number 5, which is again, I think that's another translation of the Waka Romanza thing. Yeah, that is. It's the same series. Fire Force, Einen no Shobotai, number 6. Haikyuu, number 7. Yep, Haikyuu, number 7. Spy X Family, number 8. Golden Kamui, number 9. And Boku no Hero Academia, number 10.
Awesome. Can I just say that I'm really happy that Kingdom and Golden Kamuy are on these lists. Not what I would have expected a year or two ago when I originally saw them. Also, one thing I thought of just now: Giant Killing is still going on.
Oh yeah, Giant Killing is still going on. It's in the 50
Wow.
it's in the 50s in volumes, I think, or close to it. But it's still out there.
You know, if I could get a second season of a sports anime, Giant Killing, man, would I kill for that? No pun intended.
Oh, me too. I'd love that one. I know when we talked about that in our deep dive a while ago, I said Capeta, but Giant Killing would be on the short list of series that wouldn't be too far behind it. Absolutely. Yeah, okay. So just for the record, if anyone is interested, Hozuki was number 12, Jujutsu Kaisen number 13, which means it probably got a nice bump from the anime premiere, although it may be a little too soon for that. Blue Period number 14, which is a great seinen manga, which has been much awarded, which will never get an anime. Just for the record, Blue Period really good. Um, Anything else interesting? Giant Killing number 16, Tokyo Revengers number 17, which was rumored to have gotten an anime version, but that rumor turned out to be premature. So anyway, so that's it. Let's look at anime Blu-ray. Anime Blu-ray. In the anime Blu-ray list, number one we have. Oh, what is this? This is not a good translation. How to Raise Her. Let's look at the original.
Oh no, that sounds terrible.
Yeah, I want to see the original. I want to see the original and get a better translation of what this is, because this is clearly Google messing with Enzo's head. Uh oh, How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend. That's what this is. How to Raise a Boring Girlfriend. How charming for the world that that was our number one Blu-ray this week. How to
Can we
Raise a
can we
Boring Girl.
keep can we keep calling it How to Raise Her?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean that's anime for you. Okay, what else do we have in our top 10? Let's see. We have Made in Abyss, Dawn of the Deep Soul came in at number 2, very encouraging. Yahari, volume 1, I assume that's season 2, number 3. In the corner of the world, which is a very good anime film, came in at 4 and 5 with the regular and supreme editions. Made in Abyss normal version was number 6. It was the limited edition was number 2. Fruits Basket, second season, volume 3, number 7, which it feels a little mad to me, except it's got Momiji on the cover, and Momiji is the best character, so that's good. Diary of Our Days After School. What is Diary of Our Days After School? What do you think that one is? What kind of bad translation do you think that one is? Um, let's see. Diary of Our Days After School. Let's see what that is. It's not School Days, so for you nice boat fans out there, it's not that one. Um,
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned Nice Boat. That was the best meme that came out of that show.
oh, it's the fishing one. It's the fishing one. It's the
The
fishing show.
fishing one.
The girls' fishing show. You remember that? Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you just had to say girls and I was like, okay.
Gundam Blu-ray Libraries, Mobile Suit Gundam number 9. By the way, work on the full-size Gundam statue, moving Gundam statue in Yokohama, progressing apace, should be opening to the public in a couple of months. And Anna and the Snow Queen, the Disney film, number 10. Any input there?
Uh Not too much. I mean, the first one was probably the worst one out of all of them. The other ones I wasn't too broken up about. I was actually pretty happy with the list this week, but oof, that first one.
Yeah, I know it's not good. Anime DVD, which is often has a lot of overlap. It has the same series number 1. Sorry, it's up there. Raise a Boring Girlfriend. Number 2 is One Piece Log Collection Wedding. Yahari number 3. In This Corner of the World number 4. And in the Snow Queen 5. Theatrical Curious George comes in at number 6. Uh,
Is that an anime?
no. Made in Abyss normal edition number 7. Seriously though, Made in Abyss, wouldn't you get that on Blu-ray? I mean, I guess some people don't have Blu-ray players. But that movie, that's such a beautiful series. It seems a shame to watch it on DVD, but there you go. Paw Patrol season 2, number 8. That's an American cartoon, I think. I'm not 100% sure. Pets 2, number 9, and Paw Patrol season 2 Everest comes in at number 10. So as usual, a lot more non-anime stuff on the DVD list.
Right, makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that as always. Yeah, definitely. I think overall these lists were a little bit healthier this time than last time. I think, especially on the DVD front. Uh, no etch arrows or whatever this time, so
Mhm.
that was good.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, same here. So moving on to the next thing, I'm actually gonna kind of start chunking our news out into nice little collections, and the one I want to start with, Guardian Enzo, is a rumor.
Okay.
So this was actually something that I saw on Twitter, and then you retweeted it or replied to it, I think. And this was from the director Shuhei Yabuta on his Twitter. He basically kind of teased the the second season of Vinland Saga, which got us, I think, both super excited, where he uploaded this kind of concept art cell, a work with three of the characters, Thorfinn, Askeladd, and Canute, and they were all saying stuff like, I think Thorfinn said, "How long must we wait?"
Mm.
And then Askeladd said, "That's why I hate kids," and then Canute with the big thing, "It's soon, I guess,"
Yeah.
which I think a lot of people, especially myself, are reading it as a tease that something is coming for season two. And Guardian Enzo, you said this before, but he's teased it before, right?
Well, yeah, he did. I got the impression it was unintentional the first time, but in an interview, he made a comment that was hard not to interpret as saying a second season was already agreed, talking about some things, but he never like officially said it. This time around was an obviously intentional troll. The other thing, in addition to the lines of the three characters, is there were Viking runes in the drawing, and the Viking runes translated to, the first one was sea, as in ocean. The second one was son, as in father and mother's son, and the third one was the number two. So sea, son,
Wow.
two. So yeah, if he's not teasing it, then he's a right cruel bastard. That's all I can say. And I think the most likely scenario here is it's wit disease. It's just taking a while for wit to be ready to commit to it, because Wit is not Mappa. They don't just take on as much shit as they can for the sake of trying to get income and then worry about sorting it out later. They actually, try to schedule things so that they can actually do them, which is one reason why they dropped Attack on Titan, I think, which was always a nightmare for them logistically. And let me just say, for the record, if Wit dropping Shingeki no Kyojin gets us a second season of Vinland Saga even 5 minutes sooner, I consider that a holy, holy, holy worthwhile trade off.
Yeah, I agree with you a little bit, even though I love Attack on Titan as well. But if I could choose between the two, I'd probably take Vinland Saga 2. It's just a much more interesting story. And especially with the translation of the runes, which I hadn't even noticed, they're really teasing the next manga stuff. Very broadly speaking, but
I don't know how you interpret that as anything but an acknowledgement that at least he expects this to happen. I don't see why he would do that if he didn't. It would be so incredibly. I mean, it would be really a mean thing to do to the fans, wouldn't it? If you weren't expecting, if you didn't have good reason to think that was going to happen, why would you do that?
yeah, I mean, the only thing I could think of is he's trying to actually push for it this way
Oh,
and get fans to scream a little bit about it. So if that was your goal, sir, mission accomplished because we're screaming about it as much as we can. Also, he's a really nice guy. I followed his Twitter after that, and some of the anecdotes he leaves for things is very interesting. So we shouted out Jake an episode or two ago. I'll shout out Shuhei uh, Yabuta as well, which is just Yabshu55 on Twitter. So go follow that if you're into anime and want to see some behind the scenes stuff from one of the directors of one of the big studios in the industry.
cool.
Okay, so speaking of series, let's go into a bunch of series announcements and air dates that came up. And we'll start with the first one from Anime News Network by our boy, Rafael Antonio Pineda.
Mm,
So this is about Kimono Jihin
mm.
anime, which is going to premiere in January 2021. You added this to the docket, so tell me a little bit about this because I'm completely unfamiliar.
Yeah, just we knew it was coming. It just the timing had not been announced. I suspected winter, but it's nice to see it confirmed. It's a manga called Kemono Jihen, which is a really really good manga. I like it a lot. It's about basically it's a yokai story, but it's about like half demons and tanuki. And there's a tanuki in Tokyo who runs a detective agency, and he passes as a human most of the time, as tanuki tend to do in anime. And he ends up getting called out to a case in the country where he meets this boy who's at least half. They really call them monsters. Kemono. That's basically what it translates to. Um, it's a Jump Square manga. The mangaka is Fujimori Masaya. Excuse me, no, that's wrong. The mangaka is Aimoto Sho. Aimoto Sho.
I'm Otosho. Yep.
And the yeah, Fujimori is the director of the anime.
Yes.
So I really like the manga. I don't think it's a 5-star ultimate classic, but it's funny, it's offbeat, it's dark, it's got a very interesting side cast of characters. It's an offbeat shonen fantasy that I think is head and shoulders above 90% of the stuff that gets adapted into anime, if not more. So while I'm not expecting this to be anime of the year for 2021, I am expecting it to be quite good. There's no boners in the cast or the staff list; they're all fine. So it's not something that I think is going to get messed up. So I'm looking forward to Kimono Jihen.
Awesome. Awesome. And then I'll go through a couple of quick announcements that I honestly don't want to spend too much time on because they're known quantities at this point.
Sure.
The first one is Reincarnated as a Slime. It's coming on January 12th. So, Slime fans, get excited for that one. And then the other one that I quickly want to talk about is the Resident Evil CGI miniseries. This is Resident Evil is a survival horror game from Capcom. And so at TGS, along with another announcement we'll be talking about, they announced this, which was interesting because the CGI movies are the very definition of popcorn flicks, very mindless. And they've released a few of these in the past, and I've watched and enjoyed all of them, though they're not amazing. It's interesting that they're doing a mini series on Netflix this time, but with the same kind of character models and vibe and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see for that. But I don't think you've played the games or heard of it, Guardian Enzo. So
I know of it. I know Resident Evil. It's about as famous a game as there is, but I haven't actually played it. So
yeah, as long as you don't judge it off the Mila Jovovich movies, you're good
yeah,
there.
I didn't see that.
Okay. So the next big thing, the first one that I want to talk about is Lupin the Third.
Mm.
So this is the Lupin the Third, the first, which is going to go into select cinemas in October, and then it's going to be available for purchase in December. But what's interesting about this one, Gardens, I don't know if you've seen the trailer, but this is a full CGI movie,
Yeah.
and it looks like it looks as good as a Pixar movie or something like that, or at least maybe not a Pixar movie, but at least a Disney animated movie. So there's a significantly higher budget, it seems like, and it's definitely targeting a more mainstream appeal. But any opinions on this? Are you excited about this? Do you like Lupin the Third?
Yeah, I saw the trailer too. I mean, it's like if the new Ghost in the Shell is like the Yang of modern CGI, this is pretty close to the Yin. It looks so much better. Beastars is probably the pinnacle of TV CGI anime for me, but this looks really good for theatrical. I will say Lupin is a big franchise. I mean, it's like Conan or something. It's incredibly popular, has been for years, which is why it's getting a big budget. I'm not what I would call a fan of the Lupin franchise. I've generally liked most of them. It's interesting. It doesn't quite connect with me in any kind of a visceral way. I just sort of like it more than love it. But you know, this does look good, and it looks thematically to be a pretty. I don't necessarily like grand reimaginings like Fujiko Mine, which to me was like really lost the plot for
Blech.
Lupin. and that was Okada Mari, which everything she writes, love or hate, has to be about her. And she made Lupin all about her, just as she did when she entered the Rurouni Kenshin universe, and the results to me were similarly disastrous. But I wish she'd stick to original anime because I think that's much better than her adaptations, although she did some good adaptations back in the day. Um, like Horo Musico. So no, I'm not a huge Lupin the Third fan, but I will see this probably just because, as you said, it looks really good, and it's an interesting franchise. I don't love it, but I like it.
Yeah, I love it quite a bit. I really liked the last anime series they did. I think it was a year or two ago. That one they did some very interesting things with, especially at the end. So, and what was interesting was they released it in France or Italy, I think, first, which is where the anime series was set in. So
Mm.
there's an international audience
Oh
for
yeah,
Lupin the Third, and I think they're really positioning it as something like bigger than just an anime series.
I agree.
So that's exciting. The other big show I wanted to talk about, just because I'm a Hiro Mashima fan, is that we did get the confirmation of the Eden Zero anime, which is coming out on April 2021. And this article is also on Anime News Network, and it's by Crystalline Hodgkins. Give me 1 second.
Is that your phone?
Yeah, that was my phone. I was getting a call.
Oh, that's the first rule. The first rule, please turn off your phone. Do you ever watch MythBusters?
No, no. Sorry, it was my wife. Uh she's been worried because I've been sick.
Oh,
So I think yeah.
well, MythBusters had a rule that if anybody's phone went off during filming, that they had to buy a case of beer.
Okay.
Just for the
Fair enough.
record. Okay.
All right, I'll get you some
Okay.
sometime. But
All
okay,
right.
getting back into it.
Yeah.
JC Staff
Yes.
is going to be doing it. Crystal Hodgkins wrote the article. And what's interesting about this one is that I actually went through and read the first manga volume, and it is very different from both Rave Master and Fairy Tail. The one commonality between Fairy Tail and this is there's a happy character. I don't know if it's the same happy as the original as the Fairy Tail series, but other than that, it's very different. The two main characters I think are very different, which is nice. What are your opinions on the fact that it's JC Staff that's doing it?
Who did Fairy Tale again? Which studio?
A1 Pictures.
Okay. I'm not enough of a fan to be that bothered by which studio it is, to be honest with you. We talked about my relationship with Fairy Tale a little bit already, so we don't need to go deeply in it again. But first of all, like, least surprising confirmation ever. Let me just say that. But yeah, it's JC Staff as a studio is like one of those studios where it's when you hear the name JC Staff, you don't necessarily say, "Oh, that's great," or "Oh, that's awful." It's just kind of like, you know what I'm saying? It's one of those studios. It's just like, okay, that's in the murky middle. They're usually fine. They don't have a really strong identity house style that they get slapped on everything that looks the same, like Shaft does. So it's like, if I was a fan and I heard JC Staff after A1 Pictures, I think my action would probably be like, oh, okay, well, let's see. I'd be more worried about who the director was. Because A1 Pictures is another of those studios where they can do everything from super cheap to really, really nice. And JC Staff kind of falls in that same category. They're generally in the middle, but they have some fairly lavish productions and some that are not nearly so lavish. So I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not like a huge fan of Mashima, as you know, and the reviews I've heard of Eden Zero have not been great. But like I say, those are just reviews. I haven't read the manga. I will definitely check it out because at the beginning I really liked Fairy Tail, so I know that the guy is capable of churning out some good writing. I'd be very
Yeah, the
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say the premise at the beginning is a lot more interesting and unique than Fairy Tale or Groove Adventure Rave. So I think it'll be good in the beginning. I have heard different things because I fall in that Fairy Tale circle. Fairy Tale fans seem to like it, especially since near the end, Fairy Tale got very, very kind of stale and boring, and it seems like even Mashima wasn't interested in it anymore. And before I give it back to you, the one thing I want to say is Shinji Ishihara is directing it, who did Fairy Tail and Log Horizon. So he's not bad. He did Fairy Tail. And then we've got oh no, he's the chief director, and then the main director is Yushi Suzuki, who did the third season, which was fine. I mean, it wasn't the direction wasn't the problem; the content was. The one person I'm worried about is Mitsutaka Hirota, who's the writer for the scripts of the series, and he's done Zoids Wild and Rent a Girlfriend, neither of which I've loved. So yeah, the final thing I'll say is if it's Daisy Step, they generally don't do long running series. So I'm wondering if this is just going to be a 24 episode series and then be done.
Yeah, that's possible. I don't think the manga has been as popular as Fairy Tail, at least not so far as sales are concerned. So it may be kind of a more of a wait and see. If it does really well, then maybe we'll do more. As far as reviews are concerned, I'm talking about stuff like, Baka updates and those places where you have, meta reviews where like Fairy Tail is like a full point and a half higher than Eden Zero. So that's just kind of my assumption, was that the reviews were not as good. But like I said, it's reviews mean nothing more than the paper that they're printed on, and since they're never even printed these days, it's all online. You don't worry about it. I'll give it a chance, and I like Happy. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. So there you go.
Yeah, Happy is awesome. All right, moving on. Before I go, I will say they also announced an action RPG and a mobile RPG by
Yes, I saw
Konami.
that. It's like a whole universe thing.
Yeah, which is interesting. So I guess they're investing a lot into it. I don't like Konami as a company, and any gamer that's familiar with Konami will say, ugh.
Oh,
But I mean, that's just side news.
interesting.
Yeah. Konami's kind of outside of the video games business for the most part. They have their pachinko machines and their health gyms and all these other
I
things.
see.
But moving on to the last bunch of news, I'm actually going to start with this one, which was we'll briefly talk about this. This is from Polygon, and it is by our good friend who we've never met before, Austin Goslin. But this is about Xbox Game Pass. And basically, Xbox Game Pass is the Netflix for video games, Guardian Enzo. It's something Microsoft is doing to be very competitive. And with that, the subscribers of that service also get 2 months of free Funimation Premium Plus.
3.
Which is interesting, because Funimation is owned by Sony, and Microsoft and Sony are competing in this new generation. So I don't know what's going on here. That was the only interesting thing that I saw out of this, is how does Sony, who also owns a gaming division, and Sony Pictures, which owns Funimation, how do they end up doing a deal with their biggest competitor? That was very, very interesting.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? I think we're very close to the day. However it plays out, it will play out. But I think we're very close to the day where Crunchyroll and Funimation are a single entity. That's all I'll say. I think it's coming.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then Sony has to buy Crunchyroll, and
Yes.
with the 1 billion or whatever insane number that they were throwing out there, I don't think that is quite going to happen. But maybe it will. Who knows?
We'll see. It's negotiation, my friend. Negotiation.
Okay, moving on to a bit of interesting, somewhat sad news. If you go to horriblesubs.info, which is the website for the fan sub / Ripper group, Horrible Subs, they just announced yesterday, I think, that they are closing down for good. And they list COVID as the major reason for why they're closing down their group. So I think Horrible Subs is a complex entity for me. They don't really actually fan sub a lot of things. They just rip them from Funimation and Crunchyroll. But the big argument and the big thing that I've always said is, if you can't get access to anime legally in the country that you're in, what are you supposed to do? And I think Horrible Subs did give a lot of fans who couldn't, get Crunchyroll or Funimation or whatever series they wanted to watch, they were a big service for that. So I think from that perspective, I feel bad for a lot of people. I can definitely access every streaming service in the US, but the rest of the country is the rest of the world, the rest of the country. We're all one big country, is kind of out of luck here. And I think Horrible Subs did say that somebody else will pick up the mantle. But what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I think Horrible Subs is to the parts of the, and let's be clear, it's not just the US that can access a lot of anime streaming sites. A lot of countries can, but some can't. And I think Horrible Subs to those countries is what real fan subbers were to all of us, you know, 10 and 15 years ago, right? It was the only means we had of accessing a lot of anime. And what happened with the streaming, once streaming really became eponymous, most fan subgroups disbanded. Some of them have stuck around, like Kami and Gigi. There's others. So, and my all-time favorite, Donemi, God bless them. They've done some incredible shows over the years, and they still exist. But you said rarely fan sub. I don't think Horrible fan sub to anything. I think they only ripped, as far as I know. But that's they're right. Other people will pick up the mantle. It may be a little harder. People will have to look a little harder to find this stuff, but I think they'll be able to find it. Um, you know, uh, it's funny because it may be that at the same time the Horrible Subs, there may have been some other news story that broke in the world. I'm not sure. If I'm remembering correctly, there may have been another big news story in the non-anime world that broke right at the same time. But if you went to like anime sites and stuff, nobody was talking about that story. Everybody was talking about, oh my God, did you hear this huge news? Horrible Subs disbanded. So it is proof that we kind of live in a little insular world of anime sometimes. It's an inconvenience. And for the folks who can't get Crunchyroll, can't get Funimation, can't get High Dive, yeah, they're going to have to work harder. But I will say, like I said, this is what it was like for all of us back in the day. And what really sucks now is that when a show does not get streamed, a lot of times you can't get it anywhere because there are so few real fan subgroups left that nobody subs it. Which really sucks. But that's the reality of the streaming world. Fan subbing is really a niche thing right now. Anime. I'm sure that Crunchyroll and Funimation and all these folks are probably celebrating. But don't pop the champagne because, like they said, somebody else will pick up the mantle. The stuff will still get out there. This is anime. The stuff will still get out there.
Yes, for sure. So moving on to happier news. This is something you added to the docket, but Matsumoto Ray animated Pokemon Gotcha music video by Bump of Chicken, and I believe it was animated by Bones, was it not?
It was.
Yeah, so this was a nice little video. This is from Anime News Network by Jennifer Sherman, and obviously the link to the video. We'll also link to it in the description. This was a very, very interesting video, very stylish, I think, and very catchy, and a very odd combination. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I mean, I tweeted this out, but 2020 being as weird a year as it is, I don't think too many people had Bones animating a Pokemon video with a Stand By Me theme in their list of things they expected to see happening in 2020. I certainly didn't. Um, this to me is like it's a great video. I mean, it's a great. I use that word rarely. It is a great video. It's beautifully, lavishly animated. Pokemon has never looked better. Matsumoto Rie, for those who don't know, is the young director of Kyoso Giga and Blood Blockade Battlefront, Keikai Sensen. She's she's in the top handful, 3 or 4 great young directors working in anime today. She's a phenomenal talent. Um, and it's just a great little 3.5 minute escape. It's bubbly, it's funny, and the really interesting thing for me, apparently, she is a huge Stand By Me fan, as anyone with any sense is, and so she really incorporates this into the video, especially at the beginning part of it. That was the part that really threw me. I was like, wait a minute. That's Stand By Me. What is Stand By Me doing in a Pokemon video? So it was. If you haven't seen it, it's streaming for legally for free, as far as I know. You can watch it for free. Um, it made me think honestly. God, how great would it be if Bones did a Pokemon series. Wouldn't that be cool? Of course, it's not going to happen, but wow, Bones doing a full on Pokemon anime, that would be great. That would be so much fun to watch.
Would it though? I mean, I liked Pokemon back in the day, but I've kind of fallen off it a little bit more. And I was one of those people who loved Digimon, but even the new Digimon movies have been kind of eh. So be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, I know, but I'm also probably more of a Digimon than Pokemon fan, but I did like Sun and Moon actually. But I just think it would be really cool to see this incredibly iconic anime property, pop culture property, in the hands of maybe the best studio in the game. We got a little taste of it with that 3 minute video for Gotcha. So it's yeah. Let's not make too much of it. There's no Bones Pokemon anime coming. I just think it was really cool that this thing exists in the first place. And if you haven't seen it, go see it because it is a great video. Also, I like Bump of Chicken for the record, and it's a good song too. It's a really good song.
Yes, I agree. We'll see we will see how it pans out. But I'm always a little bit trepidatious. Plus, it's Nintendo. Nintendo is notoriously hard to work with, from what I've heard. So, moving on to another cool story, and what we'll close off with, and this is us giving our friend Rafael Antonio Pineda the final say of the week, which is Harvey Awards induct Osamu Tezuka into Hall of Fame. So the Tezuka, everybody knows, he has written Astro Boy, which is kind of like almost the birth of manga and anime in some ways. He's written Blackjack, Dororo, and a bunch of other things. So the Harvey Awards are going to have a digital event this year, and they are going to basically give him an award for this. So, any thoughts on this? This is a nice thing to kind of see.
Yeah. Just finally, just to say finally, what took you so long? That was the reason I wanted to include it, is just because the idea that this Comic Hall of Fame could exist in 2020 and Tetsuka would not be in it, to me was almost beyond belief. That was my reaction, was, wait, he wasn't already in the Comic Hall of Fame? So about time is all I'll say. And if you're ever in my part of Japan, in Kansai, in between Osaka and Kobe, there's a Osamu Tezuka museum you can go to, because he was born in Takarazuka, which is a small town, not that small, but a smallish town between Kobe and Osaka, right on the train line. And there's a Tezuka museum you can go to there that I think is well worth your time. So check it out.
Yes. One thing was worth noting is that the Eisner Awards I think a little bit more known among comic book fans, but what's important about the Harvey Awards is that they're actually awards that are given out and selected by a panel of actual comic book creators and artists. So this is people who work on comic books and stuff like that, kind of awarding something to people that they probably look up to. So a little bit different, and a great thing to see as always, because anime and manga owe a lot to Tezuka for sure. All right, and with that, we have slain the Goblin Lord, and so we are going to move on to the next part of the journey.
Topic of the week.
So, dear listeners, we have slain the beast, or rather the Goblin Lord, and now we head to what is the last boss of this adventure. This is the anime deep dive, the topic of the week, and so this week, Guardian Enzo, I've got an interesting one for you. I want to talk about story ownership, and specifically about what happens when the original creator of a story, so the mangaka or the writer, they go a particular direction, and the audience and sometimes even the characters are going a completely different direction. So I want to talk about, ultimately, my first question to you is, who do you think owns the story? Is it the original creator and whatever they say goes? Or can the fans have some ownership of a story as well? What's your opinion on this? Let's start there, and then we'll kind of see where it takes us.
The original creator. And that's our deep dive for the week, fans. Thank you for listening. Let's move. No, I think the original creator owns a story. And I've had a lot of original creators piss me off. You're going to talk about at least one of them, I suspect. and that's their right. It's their story. I don't think if a creator wants to see how their series is going and adapt a little bit based on the input they get from fans, that's the choice they can make. It's a valid choice. It's not a valid expectation. That's the difference.
So I guess for me, I kind of agree with you too. I think the author is definitely the one that has the final say. They're the one who've built up this story. They're the one who put in the work to make this memorable experience, and they definitely have the right to destroy it if they want to. And I do want to talk about those specific cases where an author will so let's look at a few examples. I think in those case studies, I think will definitely inform our discussion a little bit more because I don't think it's always as simple as just leaving it to the author. Because if you've been involved in a series for a while, I feel like you're fairly attached to it. There's an investment to it, and there's something what I like to call, and I think I heard this from Brandon Sanderson, who I think is a fantasy author, and everybody should go check out his YouTube channel. But he talks about how every story will have a promise to its readers. And it doesn't necessarily need to be an explicit promise, but every story will, with the way it starts off, with the way it presents its characters, it will kind of give the audience a promise. And I think sometimes uh, a story will give you a particular promise and then take you on a completely different direction. Or the promise that the author intended to set up is not the one they actually end up going with. So in that case, let's look at Chihaya Furu as a really good example, right?
Hmm.
Or Fruits Basket. We have an author that is focusing on characters. I mean, it is their story, but they're focusing on characters that honestly don't fit the mold of what even they're telling. And, they may like those characters or love those characters. But as a fan, how are you supposed to react to seeing your favorite creator kind of take the story in a direction that feels really off or really bad? How do you kind of reconcile that with the fact that, it is their story at the end of the day?
Well, I think it's a slippery slope when you start talking about an implied promise. I think that's a slippery slope because you're the one who's interpreting what that promise is, and you're not the writer. And maybe it's because I write fiction myself that I have my sympathies more lie with the creators here because I kind of know what that experience is like, and what you have in mind when you start a series. If you trust your instincts and let them guide you, the characters can take a story in a direction that you didn't originally plan it to go. So should you say no? I'm going to not trust my instincts and I'm going to manipulate things to go back this way because I feel like that's what I promised when I started out. No, I don't think so. I think you should go with where your gut tells you the story should go. Um, you mentioned Fruits Basket maybe a little bit less so because I think it's more obvious from the beginning kind of where the author's inclinations lie, and it was really the first anime that gave a different impression, and that's not her fault. It's just that the anime took a different interpretation, and kind of for a lot of us who that was our first experience with Fruits Basket, even before the manga, that colored our interpretation of what the series was. And I think as we get into the final season of Fruits Basket, I mean, we will see the situation with Kill and Toru that will get some attention, and it won't be totally ignored the way it was in the second season. Um, but Chihaya Furo is a more profound example to me because I love this series. You mentioned last week talking about I forget what it was now about.
Yahari.
Oh, Yahari. How and I said only when we love something does it have the ability to hurt us that much, and that's how I feel about Chihaya Furu and where the manga has gone. And I've dropped the manga because I just can't take the where Sutsugu is taking the series. I think it's misguided, but at the same time, it is her series, and my option is not to say you're wrong, change it. My option is to say I'm dropping it, and I took that option. The author has the option to do what they do. The reader has the option to do what they do, and I've taken my option. But I don't have the right to say you're wrong about the way you're writing your series, and you need to change it to conform to my expectations.
Sure. I think what's interesting about manga versus say Western storytelling and Western fantasy authors is I guess the one thing that I'll point to is that I think feedback is essential to anybody. I think you can be writing in a vacuum or you could be creating in a vacuum and you might be seeing the story in a different way than your readers. I think for me personally, and this is something that I believe in, I think it's important for you to get feedback because what if the author doesn't really know that, you know? Like, what if I think you can be vitriolic and you can feel entitled as a fan, and I'll never preach for that. But I think feedback to authors is not a bad thing. And I think the example that I'll give from Western media and Western writers who I know the most about is that they have something called a beta reader. You know, and a beta reader will go through and they will read, and the beta reader's job is not to say, I want this to happen. Their job is to say, this is how I interpreted this. And you said you write fiction. I have also tried my hand at it, and I'm kind of doing it in the background. And I have, you know, people close to me read certain things, and it's always very illuminating how when I craft a scene or something, I have a very specific intention with that scene, but they will read it a totally different way. And so I'm wondering if do you think maybe there's a problem with the feedback loop in manga in the fact that it's you know it's got such a tight schedule and such a tight deadline, and then anime even more so because at that point the story is done that feedback just isn't possible.
Well, I think first of all, beta readers are great, but that's not what the premise of that's not the original premise of the question to me. That's beta reader is basically an editor in my view. And in manga, generally speaking, you don't have beta readers because, as you said, there just isn't time, especially with weekly manga. But that is really the editor's job to kind of be the catcher in the rye, if you will, to kind of say, you know, this is how I think this is going to be interpreted. Did you mean this to come off this way? Because this is how it comes off. You know, and I think that's different. Again, you know, I think light novel writers, because they do a lot of what they do in the social media world, I think they get a fair amount of feedback as they're creating. Whether that's good or bad or not, I don't know. I think light novel readers get a lot more direct feedback that probably gets incorporated into their writing process than mangaka do, and which are better, generally speaking, from an artistic standpoint, manga or light novels. Well, you tell me. Everyone will have a different answer to that question. Um, but I think one could even make the case that light novels are what happens when readers have too much control of the process. And I know it seems like that I may be scapegoating light novels, which I have a tendency to do, but I don't think that's the case. I think it's the reality. I think light novel is a medium where readers have a lot of feedback and have a lot of influence. And this is the result is the result. And in my argument, in my view, it's not a healthy result. Um, so I think there's a role for beta readers. There's a role for editors. Sometimes they're different people. Sometimes there's the same. And I think, Twitter and other social media does give writers of things like manga a chance to get feedback from people. And that can be very healthy. And if the writer chooses to absorb that feedback, that's fine. You know, when I was writing, I've published stuff serially before. Like when I did my Seirei no Morbido, I mean, I can only call it a novel because it was, almost 100,000 words. It was quite long. Um, and I broke that up into, something like, I don't know, about 30 chapters, and I released it serially. And I got feedback as those chapters were going on, and I read the feedback. And there were times, in effect, those were my beta readers. But it was my choice whether I chose to act on that feedback or not. That's my point. And uh, our instincts can be wrong. There can be times when people reveal things to us that we can't see for ourselves because we can't see the forest for the trees. We're too close. But uh, I'd rather err in the direction of being true to your vision than err in the direction of trying to be true to your fans' expectations.
Sure, sure. And I do agree with that. I'm so happy you mentioned editors because that was something I also wanted to talk about because I think they have a particular amount of ownership because at the end of the day, a mangaka, even though they're afforded a good chunk of freedom. And, it's the same for like a studio or a writer or original work. There are business people and there are people like editors and stuff like that kind of direct the story. And I think if you read something like Bakuman, you'll notice that an editor can actually ruin the experience of writing a manga and stuff like that. So
Sure.
I think I do wonder, like, do editors for whether it's light novels or manga or stuff like that, do they have too much of a heavy handedness? And the reason I mentioned this is because certain mangaka, I think it was the Bleach mangaka and even the Naruto mangaka, and some of them did talk about how, Bakuman talked about this in the anime and the manga, that depending on what kind of an editor you got, a story could go really well or it could get totally destroyed. So, what do you think about the ownership in this ownership kind of triangle that we're setting up of the editor and what their place is and what it should be?
Well, I think that with manga specifically, and it's probably true with other things, but with manga specifically, the more established a writer is, the less direct control the mangaka, the editor has over the direction of the series. I think that's evident. I don't think editors tell Oda where to take One Piece. I don't think that's how it works. I think he does what he does, and they may give him a little suggestion here and there. If he chooses to take it, he takes it. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But for somebody who's up and coming, their first or second serialization, I think the editors, as you say, I think they have basically they're in the position to say no, tear it up, do it again, and the writer really has no choice but to do it. It's I think with manga specifically, editors are very influential, and maybe too influential. How realistic is the Bakuman presentation of it? I think pretty realistic from everything I've read and everything I've heard. And the editor should be a supportive presence. They should be a catalyst to help the mangaka get the story they want to tell told. I think sometimes, and as we see this with editors, what they end up doing is trying to recast the story to meet their own preferences, their own tastes, and that's where I think the editors can become more of a hindrance than a help. And it's the heavy-handedness, and I'm sure that with editors, they're trained. I've even done a little editing myself to try to divorce your own prejudices from your editing, from your criticism. But they're human beings. That does happen. And I do think, as compared to say a novelist, I think the editors are important with novelists too. I'm not talking light novels here. I'm talking like full on, published on paper books, but they have a big influence. But it's a very different sort of relationship than if you're doing a weekly serialization of a manga, where you really have a almost constant back and forth between the editor and the mangaka. And I think, as I said, with younger writers, the editors in the manga process are almost in a godlike position, really.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the last thing I kind of want to talk about is this concept of reader surveys, right? And surveys and popularity rankings and stuff
Oi,
like that.
oi.
Uh, and I know certain mangaka. For me, Hiro Mashima is the one I think of the most because he has openly in interviews said that he wanted to kill specific characters and he was not allowed to do it because of the popularity polls
Mm.
and the character rankings. And he said that if he had taken out certain characters beforehand, it would completely kill the momentum of the anime and the manga and all that stuff. And so I think the reader surveys are an interesting thing in this as well that I've been curious about. If we and I think what's interesting is as Western fans we don't have that kind of say. But do you think that character polls and stuff like that should drive the story, or should they not?
They should not. Is that a too short an answer? They should not. I mean, with Weekly Shonen Jump particularly, the reader surveys are infamous. I mean, these are moments of abject terror for the writers, because it's not only character polls. They have a weekly poll,
Right, for the manga itself.
and that's like that's life and death for these people. That determines a lot of times what gets dropped. It even stuff like with Shonen Jump is this whole biblical cultural to itself, like how close to the front are you published? The order of like I said, the order of the series, who gets the color pages. I mean, it's incredibly stressful for these people. Reader surveys, popularity polls, character polls, they're fun for fans. Do you think Hiro Mashima should be forced to decide who lives and who dies based on character polls? I don't.
Yeah, I don't, but at the same time, I think it goes back to the question with Chayafuru, right? What if a character poll could tell the author, Taichi's probably the one you want to focus on. I do want to play devil's advocate and say that certain mangaka do need to hear that stuff. I don't think it should dictate what they do, but I also think that I maybe my next question, and I think the thing that I'm driving at is, what do you think is the perfect way for fans to convince their creators, or to give their creators the feedback that is, I think, sometimes needed if a story is going off the rails? Because I think you have an approach, right, where you just disconnect from the series if you don't like it, and I think that's a fine approach. But for me, that also feels like it's almost giving up on the series. And for me, it's been really hard. Like, I finished Shokugeki no Soma all the way through, and let me just say, the final arc, or the final season, was even worse than the whole, like, the thing that a lot of people jumped off on, and I think you did, which was the central arc. Like, stuff gets worse and worse and worse, and I do wonder if some kind of feedback would have saved or fixed those things.
I don't know that it didn't exist, though. I mean, who knows? I don't know what the process was specifically with Shokugeki no Soma. I do know that some mangaka I like are on Twitter, and I do follow them on Twitter. Now, with mangaka, there's a language barrier with a lot of them. They don't all read and speak English well enough that they're comfortable communicating in it. But if you're, let's say you're a Japanese fan, let's take the language question out of it and just answer your question more in the abstract. What would be the perfect way? Well, if your mangaka chooses to connect to the world through social media, I think it's okay to say, um, in a non-entitled way, and I can't stress that enough, non-entitled, to say, hey, I really love your work, but do you realize that this is kind of the impression that's happening? This is what's happening here, and maybe string a little tweet stream, 3 or 4 tweets together, so you can tell your story and say, and um, I would love it if this kind of thing got some consideration. And I'm sure you've thought about all this, but just so you know, there are fans out here who, I'm not the only one. There are a lot of us feel this way. That would be, I think, an acceptable and healthy way to communicate with the writer, because they're choosing to make themselves accessible. If they choose not to make themselves accessible via social media, what? You're not going to. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question. Go to the publisher. Go to the publisher and say, hey, could you pass this feedback on to the writer? I only bothered to go to the trouble to do this because I love it so much and I really want it to be better.
Yeah, and the reason I brought up the question of feedback is because I remember Bleach and what happened to Bleach, right? And Bleach, as it got closer and closer to where the anime actually got canceled in the latest arcs, Bleach just kind of fell off a cliff, and a lot of people disassociated with it, right? And it fell off and off and off until this big behemoth kind of fell to the wayside with sales and stuff like that. And I think you can vote with your wallet as well, or with your time, or with your energy. But I almost kind of feel bad for the mangaka then, because they've given you so many hours of enjoyment and these characters and these things. And for me, I want like a more hopeful way to kind of give back to them in some ways. Because if you have a friend, let's say, and they've kind of lost their way. I wish there was a way to kind of do that for anime and manga, and I want to go to anime in a little bit, but for manga, I think it's almost, for me, it's a little bit painful, which is why I stick to a story till the end generally, unless it like really pisses me off. But do you think it's kind of sad for the mangaka, especially? Yes, they have the right to go with whatever story they want, but the consequences for that might be that they end up losing their popularity, their livelihood, because for them it is a job as well, right?
Yeah. It's sad. Absolutely, it's sad. I also, though, don't think that I have a responsibility as a consumer to continue financially supporting them if artistically I no longer believe in the product that they're putting out. It's sad, but it's not my responsibility. My responsibility, as you said, you vote with your wallet, and you know if the person you're voting for is no longer in your view deserving of your vote, vote for someone else. And it's very sad. Absolutely. You think I'm not sad about dropping Chihaya Furo? It gutted me. And but it still continues to be popular. I'm sure she's doing fine. She has pissed off a lot of her readers, but she still has good sales, and so she's doing okay. If it is a case like you say with Bleach, and I was never a Bleach fan, just for the record, so I don't know the ins and outs of this story. But if it is a case where what you're saying, in effect, what I'm hearing is, if somehow or another this could have been communicated to Kubo, that's the mangaka, right? Kubo,
Yes, Kubo type. Yep.
and if this somehow could have been communicated to him, maybe he could have saved it. Is that kind of what you're asking me?
Yeah, yeah, and it's the same for like other series that I think have hit a decline. Wouldn't you have liked to somehow tell the mangaka of Shokugeki, hey, maybe you're going off the rails into the fantastical a little bit?
Where was the editor?
That's a good point.
I
That's a
mean,
good point.
where was the editor? It's their job, isn't it? Who knows? Maybe it was the editor. Maybe it was a bad editor pushing the mangaka of Shokugeki to go in these directions. Maybe they were cheering them on and saying, "Yeah, you'll do this." Who knows? I mean, we don't know what goes on the inside. Like I say, it's up to the author if they choose. Like George Martin makes himself somewhat available. I mean, he's on Twitter. He has a website, and he does sometimes respond to comments on either place. Um, and this is a guy who gets constantly bombarded with people berating him over how slow he is, which frankly is not wholly unwarranted. But I understand too that it takes as long as it takes. That's how writing is. But he chooses to make himself available, and then he chooses to ignore what he chooses to ignore. And I don't think there's another way for this to be. I don't think there's a perfect solution. It's up to the author to decide how accessible they want to be and how much they want to be reactive to feedback. And we can't we can't stipulate, we can't demand any other system. That's it. That's how it is.
Yeah, I think I agree with you because if somebody isn't emotionally ready for taking negative feedback or criticism, then that too can destroy them. And I think that's an important point you bring up is if the author wants it, then they should then you should go out and tell them and stuff like that. I miss the days when we could mail things like comic books, and I'm sure manga and stuff had this as well, where you could write letters and send them in and stuff like that. And
Buddy, that still happens here. That still happens here. People send stuff to mangaka all the time. They send letters, cards. It happens all the time.
yeah, I think the One Piece guy Oda, he got a letter from a terminal patient, and then he ended up going and visiting that person and telling them the ending to One Piece, which was a really heartwarming and awesome story. But and I think Star Wars, I think it happened the same way.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Now they mention it. Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah.
Star Wars. Yeah.
So I think those kind of interactions are very beautiful. But before we kind of wrap this up, the one question I have is we've talked a lot about manga and we talked a lot about light novels, but what do you think is the feedback loop and the ownership when it comes to anime? And anime specifically, the thing that comes to my mind is what happened with, say, Evangelion, for example, or any divisive series where an original anime series is DVD sales and disc sales the only real way to affect feedback and popularity for a series? Or is there some other kind of feedback that can exist in that space?
Well, Evangelion is an example that's sort of odd because that really was before social media, so that was out of the question. You weren't going to be communicating with Ano via Twitter or Discord or whatever, even if he'd chosen to make himself available on it. The other thing with Evangelion is Ano was literally having a nervous breakdown as he was finishing directing those episodes.
Right.
So, which I think is weirdly, I know you're less of an Evangelion fan than me, but I think that makes them incredibly compelling. One of the things I hate to say, it makes the final episodes of that series so compelling, is the fact that he was breaking down as he was doing it, and you could really tell. And he there was a feedback loop with Evangelion. One of the reasons he made the two movies, the original two movies, not the ones he's made now with Kara, but the original rebuild or end of Evangelion and all those, is basically as a fu to the people who criticized his ending in the first place. Which is one way a creator can respond. It's not maybe the healthiest way, but they can. Um, with anime, sometimes anime creators, like directors and stuff, a lot of those people are on social media and they will respond to feedback. The problem with anime is there's a production lag there. And by the time, the feedback were to, even if there were like a systematic process where you were able to get feedback to the director or the adapter or whatever, by the time they got it, they're already so far ahead in the process that they can't make any narrative changes. I mean, they're still working on finishing episodes, but in terms of like scripts and shit like that, that's done weeks and weeks in advance, episodes in advance. So that process, unless you're talking about something really long running like Fairy Tail or One Piece or something like that, if you're talking about a one or two core anime, I don't think there is any practical way, even if those people are accessible, for that feedback to have any impact on what gets to the screen.
Right. And I agree with you. I think the best way you could probably affect any kind of feedback is just to watch something in that case. Whether it's on Netflix, you just,
Yeah.
you continue to watch it and give it views, and with disc sales and with whatever.
Yeah, vote with your wallet.
Yeah. The final thing that I want to ask then is how much ownership, if any, the Western fans have? Because I think one of the most interesting things about Japanese anime is that they actually don't consider Western taste too much. Or am I mistaken in that? Because it honestly seems like they're in kind of their own bubble when they make a lot of these things, and it's good because it gives all their stuff a very Japanese taste and flair to it. But at the same time, do you feel like Western anime fans and fans outside of Japan don't really have that much of an impact on what gets made and what gets viewed?
Yes, but I do think it's starting to change because of Netflix. And I think we have some studios like Trigger, which are very aware of the international market and of tastes, international tastes. Which internationally, in terms of the money that anime is aware of, it's US one and Europe two. Those are the two places that really matter financially to anime. I think you do hear a lot of anime directors and writers say that they're shocked that when they get feedback from Westerners. It's always interesting to watch these people when they come to anime conventions like Anime Expo and stuff in the West, when because some of them are like legitimately like, I had no idea so many people here even liked anime. It's like, dude, what rock have you been living under? And then some of them are quite aware of it and quite savvy about it. So it just depends. I think it depends on the person. I think there are people involved in anime production who are quite aware of the international influence and quite aware of international tastes and how they differ from Japanese tastes. And I think there are those who are in the bubble, as you say, and totally oblivious to it. It just depends on the studio. It depends on the director. It depends on the writer. I think where the feedback can matter, this is how I would phrase it in my summation is, it's not this project, but the next project that person or that studio does may reflect feedback from viewers, even Western viewers. And I think you do see, and partly it's the vote through the wallet thing, because believe me, they know the streaming numbers and they know what sells on disc and what sells, what doesn't, and they look at the boosts in manga sales or the lack of boosts in manga sales, so they kind of know from that sense. Um, but those who are responsive to it, I think you see it impact the next thing they do, rather than the thing they're working on is kind of That's spent. That's spent money. It's there's not much influence on that because there can't be, but there can be influence on the next thing they decide to do.
Yes, I agree. And I'm glad you mentioned Trigger because Trigger is a studio, I think, that has built up quite a following in the West. And I personally don't like a lot of their stuff anymore. I think when they started off, they were definitely a more interesting studio. But the way they energize people, I've been at conventions where they have panels and stuff like that. The way they deal with their fan base and their Western fan base specifically is the reason that their movies, like I think, what was the movie that they recently did, the one about the firefighters or whatever,
Promare.
Promare. I watched that in theaters. I did not like it, but man, in that theater, did I see people cheering and
Mm.
excited. And there was a little interview at the end of the movie, which they tend to do for these limited releases, and everybody was sitting down and listening to the people from Trigger talk about how they made the movie.
Mm.
And I was one of the few people who was like, I've seen enough. I'm not a huge enough fan that I want to sit here and listen to this. I'll catch it on YouTube later. But I think that is true. I think so. To kind of wrap up the conclusion, I think the few ways we can interact as Western people is through our money, obviously, but also through conventions and then maybe social media. And I think we both agree on this. The ultimate ownership of a story is in the author, for better or worse, right?
Yep. Yep. That's it. And not only is that the case, I think it should be the case.
Yeah, and I think where I leave off on this conversation is I definitely wish there was a better way and maybe a new paradigm, like social media is a paradigm that has improved communication. Maybe a new invention or a new paradigm will make this better for people and for mangaka. Because I do think I want mangaka and anime directors and people like that. I want to give back to them as much as possible, and I think money is the big exchange here. But also, like, there were series that I wish I could have saved or that I wish I could have improved. So maybe something in the future will come of that. And if not, you do what you do and you just kind of disconnect yourself, like we did with Chihaya Furu, and
Yep.
or maybe you stick it out till the end. Like when I was writing Fairy Tale reviews, I said, no matter what they do, given the fact that I love this series so much, I'm in it till the end. And I think that's also a fine choice to make,
Yeah.
as long as you accept what it is that is happening there.
Yeah,
So,
that's it. That's it. You have to accept it. It's their baby. As long you stick to the end, I admire your loyalty. Lord knows I couldn't have done it with Fairy Tale, but I admire your or God help us Shoku, Shoma, but I admire your loyalty. But you just have to be prepared to accept whatever it is they decide because it's their choice.
yes. So with that, I think we've slain the final boss. Although we took some damages ourselves, and
Mm.
it did feel like a little bit of an unresolved issue. So I think we'll come back to the idea of ownership at some point and feedback and the very unique dynamic that anime fans, manga fans, have both in Japan and in the West and that whole thing. So I think anime is a very unique thing that I don't think any other franchise or medium kind of has. So we'll see where it goes. But with that said, I think we've handled the big battle, right? And now we'll start to head towards the epilogue or the final episode of the journey, right? The episode that you talked about where we need some time to kind of decompress and
Mm.
say goodbye to this podcast.
Haiku Challenge.
All right, listeners. So we went through the big event in our little journey, and now a pit stop before we close it all off. So as we do every week, now it seems like it's a week thing. Guardian Enzo, I want you to compose a haiku again, and this time, as you alluded to last week, it has to be to mark the return of haiku. So I enunciated that. So hopefully you got it. Give me a haiku on haiku and let me know if you need some time to think because you always do this on the spot.
Wait, what? How dare you spring this on me? No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, I did say that actually. But the haiku. I always like to do this whenever there's a new haiku season. So, all right. So haiku.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about it for a little bit, but I
Mm.
think as far as Haikyuu goes, I think it's really, really going to be an interesting season. I can't wait to watch the episode this week. And maybe we should have waited until the episode we saw the episode. But at the same time, we record on Fridays, and I'm always interested to see what Guardian Enzo comes up with because the last few, especially when I threw the Serenity one at him, I thought he would like really just stumble and struggle, but he managed to turn it around pretty quickly. So
All right, I'm ready.
go for it. Go for
Okay.
it.
I'm just doing the syllables in my head, but I think I'm right. Volleyball boys are oft redheads in anime. Hinata Shoyo.
Okay, that one I like a little bit more than your Serenity one.
Oh, that's up to you.
Yeah, especially because I'm not in it. Get a little shy and bashful there. But any focus on Hinata is a good one for me. So yeah, listeners, put that on a plaque. If some of you guys are good at Japanese calligraphy, write it down and send it to us, and we will plaster it on our wall. So,
I absolutely will.
yes. So thank you once again, Guardian Enzo, for that little change of pace.
Domo.
And with that said, we will get back to the end of the podcast with
Listener questions.
all right, dear listeners, we are back in my favorite section of the week, which is kind of the end of our journey. We've made it through our entire ordeal, and now we're heading back to the village where we started at. So we like to talk about listener questions, but before we get into that, I do want to say, when I said I enjoy listener questions and feedback and comments, I wasn't talking to the porn bots. And Guardian Enzo, what happens every week is that we end up getting one or two comments from this like avatar with an AV idol icon or something like that. I don't know. She looks like a Japanese lady in a bikini or something. And when you go and click on their profile, it's a bunch of like porn videos. So I will say thank you to all the listeners. Porn bots, you don't need to tell us anything. No hi guys or no we love you or whatever weird stuff. So with that said, let's talk to somebody who isn't a porn bot. We only got one question this week. I think we exhausted everybody from the flurry of questions we got next week, but keep them coming. We like them. So this is from YouTube by Glare Stare. And he talked about last week's episode. He said, really fun episode. Question for you guys. With stuff like Altered Carbon and Batman being made into anime, what Western series would you like to see as anime? And I'm going to expand this a little bit because I think he just means TV series. I'm going to say what Western property would you like as an anime, which will make this a little bit more wide and interesting. Guardian Enzo, you got anything for me, or do you want me to start this off?
You can start because I have a couple things and I'm deciding which ones I want to talk about.
Sure. So the one that I'll say that I want to see an anime too is maybe something more fantasy based. So I'd love to see something like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, but I'm going to go with Lord of the Rings. It would be very interesting to see like an anime set in the Lord of the Rings universe, and it would be interesting to see a Japanese take on Tolkien in anime. So that would be my pick. I think you could do something really cool if a Studio Wit or something or somebody tackled that, and then obviously it would be very popular and there's an established fan base. So for me, it'd be Lord of the Rings. What about you?
Okay, so a couple ones I want to throw out here. The King Killer Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss, which starts with The Name of the Wind, is the first book in that series, which is a George Martin kind of scenario where we've been waiting forever for the newest book to come out. But the first two books of that series are fantastic and I think would be really, really anime friendly. I think they would be wonderful. Another one I want to mention is the Otherland series by Tad Williams, which is kind of a he's known as an epic fantasy writer, but this is science fiction. It's more like it's not cyberpunk, but it's definitely set in the virtual reality kind of an environment. I think would be a fantastic anime. And then lastly, Doctor Who.
A Doctor Who anime. That's very interesting. Do you think they could actually do that? Because it's so British.
Oh, totally. With the way Sherlock Holmes is now omnipresent in anime, and you could totally do a Doctor Who anime. In fact, there was actually somebody did a very high quality fan video, a Doctor Who anime fan video, like 6 or 7 years ago, which I'm sure is still floating around on YouTube or somewhere if you wanted to see it. I totally think you could do it. I totally think you could do it, and I think it could potentially be great.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I actually haven't seen too much Doctor Who. I've seen an episode or two. I'm one of those people who, when I get into something, I try to see all of it. I did that with Stargate. I don't know if you ever saw Stargate. It's
Yeah, I remember it.
okay. I actually discovered that in college, and I started from season one and watched all 10 seasons of Stargate, SG1, then Atlantis. And so, I get into things, and Doctor Who just seems daunting with how much there is.
Well, there's only like 35 seasons.
Only 35 seasons. Maybe someday.
All right. It would make a great anime.
If they make an anime, that might be my gateway drug into that thing.
All right.
All right. So beyond that, I think that's about it for us. We responded to the porn bots, so hopefully they don't get encouraged by that. We thank you, Glare Stare, and for everybody else that didn't get to their question this week, we are waiting to hear back from you. So feel free to do that. And as for submitting questions, obviously you can do it through Guardian Enzo's Patreon. You can do it through YouTube comments. You can even leave us a review, and if you want to smuggle a question in there, I will go through and grab those. And obviously, you can reach out on Twitter at Satsukin, at Guardian Enzo, at Notaku Pod. And then finally, for the people who don't use social media, there's also Notaku at anime-evo.net. It's a temporary email until we get an official Notaku one going. Send your emails through there, and we will also answer any email related inquiries. With that said, I will say check out the Anime Evo and Lost in Anime posts for the season. There's a lot of stuff there as we get into the new season. And then I will say, before we go, Guardian Enzo, any last words on this journey, this adventure that we had this week?
Well, I'll sign off the way Dan Rather used to sign off every night on the CBS Evening News because it seems quite appropriate given the times we're in. Courage.
All right. And stay courageous, my friends, because we will be back next week. Until then, adieu, sayonara, goodbye, see you later.